Welcome to Love Lattes, the podcast designed for women who are ready to stop settling and start living a life full of authentic love, confidence, and real connection. I'm your host, Victoria, the self-love scientist, speaker, and coach, and I'm here to help you reclaim your power, deepen your relationships, and fall unapologetically in love with yourself. So grab your tea, your latte, or your favorite beverage, and let's get started. What if recovery wasn't just about staying sober, but about rediscovering your joy, rebuilding your confidence, and learning to love yourself again? On today's episode of Love Lattes, I get to speak with the incredible Michelle Charbonnier. Michelle is a passionate therapist, speaker, and advocate dedicated to harm reduction, recovery, and personal transformation. With 9 years in recovery herself, Michelle deeply understands the challenges of overcoming addiction, rebuilding self-worth, and cultivating self-love. As the executive director of Missouri Network for Opiate Reform and Recovery, co-founder of Sovereign Collective, and founder of Thriving Beyond Recovery, Michelle has spent nearly a decade holding space for individuals navigating addiction, mental health struggles, and life transitions. Through her own journey of healing and self-discovery, she has learned firsthand the power of resilience, self-compassion, and radical transformation. Michelle, welcome to Love Lattes.
Hi, Victoria. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. That's such a powerful, I remember when we first spoke and you were sharing your journey with me. I was like, I don't believe I've had an episode on recovery or sobriety. And I was like, I need you. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. Excited about it.
Yes. So I'd love to kind of start off the episode, if you're open to it, to kind of sharing what your journey looked like.
Yeah, so my journey, like my experience with drug use started relatively young. I was coming out of 8th grade, going into high school, started experimenting with alcohol, marijuana, cigarettes, where a lot of people start. And it was really out of curiosity, sensation seeking, just wanting to have fun. And I liked it. I liked it all. So I kept doing it. It was a lot of partying in high school. Marijuana became a daily habit for me. And I still did okay. Like I graduated high school. I was the editor-in-chief of my high school yearbook. I was still doing life, right? I went to college and continued the habit of marijuana use every day, lots of drinking. And at 21, I started bartending, and the manager of the bar sold cocaine. And I had experience with stimulants prior to that, but that's what really propelled my addiction with stimulants. And from there, I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And right around the time that I graduated, the daily or almost daily cocaine use turned to smoking crack. And I went for my master's degree and eventually dropped out of that program because my crack addiction was so bad. And through my 20s, I was able to basically do what I didn't know what it was called then, but harm reduction. And I stopped crack. I stopped smoking crack, which is really just another way of using cocaine. And I went back to snorting cocaine. Eventually stopped that. Used Adderall for a couple of years because it had been probably a decade or close to a decade of stimulant use, and I didn't really know what to do without it. And by the time I was 30, I had stopped the stimulants, but the marijuana was still there. It was every day. And I wasn't one of these people that was like, oh, I just smoke before bed or to like chill out after work. I woke up and I smoked weed before I did anything else. And then I got ready for work and smoked more weed. And then I went to work, and on breaks and on lunch, I smoked weed. Like it was all day, every day. And that was a constant in my life for 20 years. And I really didn't know how I was ever going to give it up. Like that felt like a stronger hold on me than even the crack habit that I had for 2 years. So I also knew that God had a really clear calling on my life, and I was going to have to be sober to do it. But I was like, I really don't know how I'm going to get sober. And at the age of 30, it started when I was 32. So going into like 33, I had a breakdown, a total breakdown. I stopped functioning. Like I was not working, I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't making decisions, I wasn't driving. I totally stopped functioning. And that propelled me to stop marijuana. I stopped marijuana. I spent about 6 weeks drunk. That did not turn out well for me. After that, I finally said, I can't keep doing this. And ended up doing like an intensive outpatient program, going back to work with my therapist and my psychiatrist, and my recovery started there.
Wow. That's how many years was that? Over.
Yeah, so I would say over like through the span of my life, about 20 years of drug use.
And thank you for sharing that with me and with our,
Yeah.
what was you said that you started having a calling. What was that calling for you?
So I had always, this is so interesting. So I had always tended I was always pulled towards people that struggled with substance use, mental health, stability, that kind of stuff. And in a lot of my life, that showed up as in dating men that I shouldn't have been dating, and I was trying to save them. And you shouldn't date people you're trying to save. But that's kind of what it looked like. Like that was what I was always pulled to. I was also raised in a family that was a very loud advocate for any type of mental health or disabilities. I had an uncle who was near and dear to me that was born healthy at 3 days old, was dropped on his head by a doctor, caused severe mental and physical disabilities. And he lived with my family for the majority of my life. So we really advocated for for those people that needed that type of support. And I remember early 20s, the show Intervention was like really popular. And I really don't think much of the show now as a professional, but back then I didn't know. And I remember watching the show and thinking, I could do this work. I could do it, but I would have to be sober, and I don't know how I would get sober.
Let's see. Wow. And so, oh my goodness, this is, that's a lot. It's a long journey.
It's I'm still on the journey, right? Like I'm almost 10 years into recovery from the substance use and the mental health crisis and all of that, but it's still work. Like I'm still growing, I'm still learning, I'm still like really digging into that deep self-work of like, why did I do this? What's at the root of it? And it comes down to loving myself and valuing myself.
Yeah. You said a really good point at the beginning of your story that even at a young age, it's just something that we want to experiment with. Like, we want to fit in, we want to feel cool. And then there's the continuation of it, the leveling up of this, like trying out different things. I've had conversations with individuals where it's literally like, oh, have you tried X, Y, and Z? And whether it's a yes or a no, or are you even in the dating app realm, they have questions like, are you a drug user or this user, an alcohol user? And my question around that, even at a young age with that curiosity to try, what do you think is kind of certain reasons why folks kind of turn to these substances or start like when it becomes like when alcohol isn't enough anymore or the marijuana isn't enough anymore?
Yeah. So obviously I've learned a lot in the last 10 years as far as being a professional, understanding the disease of addiction. And I think for a lot of people it is like you start young and it's curious, sensation seeking. We much more at a younger age seek the rushes, roller coasters, that kind of stuff. As we get older, those things aren't as appealing. We're way more cautious towards those things. And so I think that's part of it. We know that having a history of addiction in your family can also lead to it. I think for some people it's trauma. It's stuff that's happening in their environment that they don't have control of. And I think at the root of most of it is how they value themselves, how they perceive themselves, the emotions and their thoughts that they're dealing with. I always tell people, like, we are not our thoughts, especially those thoughts that are telling us we're not enough, that we're not worthy, we're not loved, we're not valued. We are not those thoughts. And we have to counteract that. And I think as kids, we don't know necessarily why we feel those things, like lack of self-worth and things like that, but we do. Like, so many people ask me, what happened at home? Like, what was wrong at home? Did you have a bad upbringing? No, I have the most amazing parents. They are kind and loving and giving, and they supported me well in all my endeavors. They gave me a great life. They sent me to private school. They raised me in church. Like, they did everything right. There was nothing they could have done differently to change my addiction.
That's a really good point. I personally can think of when it comes to that trying to hush the thought process of feeling invaluable reminds me of way back when I was married, I would turn to alcohol and like that adrenaline rush to check out and try to, for me, it was more of like, I don't want to pay attention to the real feelings I'm having right now about this situation that my marriage is not like, in essence, it's not working because it was like, this was supposed to work. And now I'm going to have to, I need to go out and just go chase and go party with my friends and literally check out and then just spending lots of money and not sleeping and coming home, and just all around not healthy decisions and hurting my relationship a little bit more. And I think it's when you finally have to sit in that reality of like, I'm going to have to face this situation one way or because I can't keep up with this. Um, and for like, I'm very curious about that process. For me, it was a moment of like, my health was off the rail, like no sleep and just like my mental health took a really hard hit. And I knew physically that I didn't like who I was or who I was becoming if I were to continue this lifestyle. Do you think, do you believe that it might be hard for some folks to notice that too?
Absolutely. It's so hard for us to see ourselves clearly, especially when we're in the thick of it, right? Like when all of the chaos is happening, when the struggle, the suffering, all of that is going on, it's really hard for us to see ourselves clearly.
And then for your own journey, you mentioned that, you may have not said this, I apologize, but if you did, you did say it earlier about, some of the reasons why we turn this way, aside from curiosity, but you mentioned you had a really healthy childhood. When I did my own reflection, I was like, my parents did the best they could.
Yeah.
I couldn't connect it there. But when it came to like studying my relationship, I did realize it was kind of a reflection of what I knew without really working on myself and giving myself the love that, I really needed in order to have a healthier relationship. And so when it comes to, you mentioned like people might be turning to this because of that lack of self-love. What is why? If they have that self-love, that lack of self-love, what is it that this, drug or alcohol or use is going to do for them?
Yeah, and I think it depends in part on what drugs we're using because we get different feelings from different drugs, right? Sometimes we want to feel the euphoria of a stimulant where we feel like we're unstoppable, we're on top of the world. Some of us want to feel numb, and that's alcohol or like opioids, right? Some of us want to like relax and use marijuana to feel like we are chill and like not thinking so much. So I think it depends on the person and what they're using to say what they're really seeking. But at the core of it, it's really avoidance of what we don't want to feel, the negative feelings. It's avoidance and it's trying to like numb ourselves.
Yeah. What was it like for you to recognize when you finally got to that space of like your own personal intervention? You're like, oh, this is, it's because I, don't have this for myself.
Yeah. And that's been an interesting journey because I would say that there has been a part of me that always has known I've struggled with self-worth, even at a young age. I mean, even as a kid, I was super into like Dr. Phil and self-help books and all of those things, to like understand how to value myself better. But I really didn't start doing that work until I was in recovery. And what I've learned is that like I've had to go, but it's a process I'm still doing. I'll say that. And it's a constant. Like this shows up for me in every area of my life, not just with addiction, but like in my relationships, in how in romantic friendship, all of the things. This shows up in how I treat my body, how I take care of myself. This shows up in my career. And I'm like, oh, there I am, my own problem again, creating my own problems. And it's like, why did I not love myself? And I've done a lot of work with therapists around this. And we've identified a situation as kind of the triggering point of this that happened in first grade with a teacher, that just started telling me these stories of like, you're not worthy, you're not enough, you're not good enough, you're not pretty, you're not valued, you're not any of these things. You don't deserve goodness in your life. You don't deserve love. And as I continue to do the work and like peel back the layers of all this, because it's so complex, it's so deep that like, okay, I'm actively changing my conscious thoughts. Now I have to work on changing my subconscious thoughts, the thoughts that aren't even happening actively, like they happen in my body, they don't happen in my mind. I feel it in my body when I'm like hesitant to do something because I don't know if I'm good enough. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. That's a really good point though. Like when you mentioned the conscious versus like the subconscious, like I knew exactly where I was like, yep. I can tell like even in the healthiest, like I'm in the healthiest relationship I've ever had, and suddenly I'll go to do something and then suddenly I feel stuck and I'm in like a mini fight or flight and I'm like, why is this happening? Why am I questioning myself? And it's
Yep.
because this journey of self-love and healing, from these small traumas that happened, and these experiences that became a norm for us. Like even in the road to recovery, it's like you're going to have these instances where it's like, oh wait, I'm not unsure, like your body freezes, or you're like, I'm not really sure how to allow myself to feel this love or the support.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy how it's the same struggle dressed up maybe a little bit differently that keeps showing up for us. And it's like, oh, there it is again.
And
Thought I dealt with this.
so for when you started your recovery and now it's been almost 10 years and now you've developed all these different programs, like, and I have to say, I feel like because of your journey, this is what fueled all of the different programs and how you became a therapist and a speaker. And now you're holding space for other folks going through the same thing. What has that been like?
It's it fills me with gratitude and it fills me with purpose. In the work that I do, like the nonprofit that I run, we're a recovery community center rooted in harm reduction. And so we are meeting people where they're at on the streets, people that are unhoused, people that are using drugs. We're providing them with wound care kits, safe sex kits, sterile syringes, Narcan, fentanyl test strips. We want them to be as safe as possible while they're making the decisions that they're making. And all of that's really rooted in radical love. We're not here to judge people. We are here to show unconditional positive regard and radical love to them. And then like moving into the therapy world, I work with a lot of people that are wanting to move away from the alcohol use, the substance use, improve their depression or their anxiety or whatever it is. And that's another level of like incredible. It's seeing people in that transition, helping people process the hard stuff and move past it and start growing and start like stabilizing and things like that. The programs that I've developed at like Thriving Beyond Recovery is really for the people who have done the deep work, whether it was addiction, mental health, grief, divorce, like you've faced some really hard struggles and you've overcome them. You've learned how to manage those things. But now you want to experience more in life. You want to experience more joy and gratitude on a daily basis. You want to go deeper into the conscious and subconscious thoughts and mindset shifts, spirituality, those types of things. And so that program is really aimed at people that are ready for the next steps after the recovery part. And then with Summer and Collective, my business partner, Danielle Elliott Smith, and I created this organization to really, again, kind of help people that are ready to elevate. Like they do pretty well at life, but they're ready to level up, take the next step, and reach different goals and build community around it.
Community is top. Like you can have the one-to-one relationships, but I feel like you can get a lot of connection and see a lot of success and growth through these groups and communities. And
it's so important.
You mentioned this word a couple of times, and for those who might be listening, just for their awareness, what is harmful reduction?
Reduction, yeah. So harm reduction, in general, harm reduction is the idea of reducing the risk of harm. Seatbelts, car seats, those kinds of things are harm reduction. Condoms. In the world of substance use, harm reduction is encouraging people to use substances in a safer way. So if they're using, like oftentimes we deal with people that are using IV drugs, so fentanyl, meth are the two that you see the most used through IV injection. And we're giving them tools to use safer. We give out sterile syringes, so they're not sharing syringes, they're not using used syringes, and they reduces the risk of disease and things like that. We also give out things like smoking kits and boofing kits because those are forms of using drugs that are safer than injecting. If you're looking at like alcohol use, you might have somebody move, and I referenced this like in regards to my cocaine use. So it's moving, like helping somebody move from using a drug in one of its hardest forms. So like for me, that was smoking crack, going to snorting cocaine because that's not as harmful as smoking it. And then going from snorting cocaine to using Adderall in pill form because that's less harmful than snorting it. And so with alcohol, it would be like, think of somebody that's drinking moonshine or a hard liquor or whiskey, or even like there's people out there that struggle with alcohol use that drink that drink things that are not designed for consumption. They drink things like rubbing alcohol, and those are really harmful forms of alcohol. And so then we encourage them to cut down to like trying less hard alcohol, liquor, beer, wine, things that are not as harmful on their body as the other things. So harm reduction is really just helping people be safe while they make whatever decisions they're going to make.
I think that's a very interesting point because like when you were explaining it, I was like, so it is still being like you're on their side, like as they're going through this, but then you're finding almost like an alternative. Like, and again, that makes sense. It reduces the harm they're doing. Do you find that with that process, then would they be more likely to start the recovery because you're trying to like change the habit and it's just like, well, no, I'm not getting, this spike, or no, I'm not feeling as shitty, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we statistically speaking, people are 70% more likely to ask for treatment, sober living, things like that, if they engage in harm reduction services.
Interesting.
So, and ultimately what we want to do is just meet people where they're at. And we realize, because a lot of us that do this work are in recovery ourselves, that they're probably not really loving themselves. And we just want to say that, like, we love you. We care about you. We value you regardless of the decisions you're making. So we're going to show up for you and help you to be as safe as you possibly can while you use. And if you decide you want to change anything about your use, we're here to support that too.
I love that you say that. I think that's such a powerful statement. And for anyone who's in this process of their life, like that's the one thing they do need to hear, which comes back to that, having that lack of self-love. Like I think personally I can remember, and if you can relate to, if you want to join in, like I think that's the one thing that I needed to hear, that I was loved, even though I was like outsourcing like this high to like add to my life because I wasn't having it. And I remember I would say like my wake up point was probably my breaking point when I was just like at the lowest of my low in my own house, thinking like, oh my God. And like my inner voice, or, if you're spiritual, I think like it was just like you are enough. Like I've got you. Like you're not alone. And that was like the sudden switch of like, I can't keep doing this anymore. I have to make a move or I'm gonna be on this floor again. And it was such a big moment. So I love that you're providing this and giving out this affirmation for those who really need to hear it.
Yeah, having people show up for us at our lowest, at our darkest is so vital. Like to know that we're not alone is really what humans need. And so it's like an honor just to do this work and to show up for people in this way.
Yeah, it's so amazing. So for anyone who's listening who might know somebody or personally might still be like creating or on the road to recovery, what are some bits of advice that they can start implementing these forms of self-love? Or what are some things that were helpful for you to even like just to start? Because I think, jumping from like, there's no real shortcut to this, honestly. I feel like it is a gradual development. It's this bridge from A to island C, and B is this, this bridge that we got to build.
Yes. Yes. As I said, 10 years into this and I'm still doing the work and things are still being revealed to me, right? It is it's an amazing process, but it's definitely a process because as soon as you think, "Oh, I'm good," then again, it shows up in a different way. Like, "Okay, there it is again. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me figure this out." And so and it's constant work. Like I think people oftentimes are looking for a shortcut, which is one reason we use substances, right? Because then we can feel or not feel, or we can feel really good or not feel at all, or whatever. And so doing what I would call the deep work of self is a process. It's a lifelong process, and you have to work at it daily. And so, but I think we start really simple. And and that's kind of how I move in life. Like, let's keep this really simple and take baby steps, right? Just as if we're trying to lose weight, but you're sedentary and hardly ever move. Walk for 5 minutes a day. Don't go for an hour. Start simple. And I think that's where we start with the self-love thing. Being in community is so important. And you can find that in so many different ways. Therapy, support groups, church groups, health focus groups, yoga. Like I have multiple communities. And I stay in relationship with therapists, psychiatrists, trusted mentors, teachers that really go back, like they help me see myself clearly. And that's why it's important to be in community. And I think that's part of life in general. But I often start my clients with affirmations, daily affirmations. I think we undervalue the ability of our minds. We know scientifically we can create new neural pathways in our minds, right? Neuroplasticity, that's a real thing. Like we can literally change the way we think. And I said earlier, we are not our thoughts. We live in a world that we are so attached to our thoughts and our emotions. In reality, that's not who we are. And we have to learn to manage those correctly. And so I start with affirmations, and I'll say in my own personal journey, this is one of the areas my first therapist started me in. And we did a lot of work to get to like the root causes of this and all that kind of stuff. But to move forward with it, she started me on affirmations. And she said, "Michelle, you don't have to believe them, but you have to do 6 affirmations every single day." And she told me 6 because it takes 5 positive thoughts to erase the one negative thought we have about ourselves. And then you want the sixth one to like replace it. And I started doing 6 affirmations a day. And in the beginning, I would journal it, I would say it out loud. I'd be outside for walks and I'd just be saying them over and over and over to myself. And people like to this day are like, do they really work? I'm like, yes, because and how I know they work, I still do affirmations in my morning journaling. But what I'm affirming now wasn't what I was affirming 8, 9 years ago because I believe those things about myself now. So I think keeping it really simple, finding the right community, finding and not just peers, but professionals, in some capacity that can walk you through this. But starting to change our thoughts, actively change our thoughts so that we change our life and we change the way we look at ourselves and we start to really love ourselves is the one of the first steps to this process.
And that's in itself is so big. It sounds small, but trust me, I think affirmations are quite powerful. It's one of the reasons why it's one of the primary love languages. Like we need to hear more of this. And it does, like, I mean, obviously it's nice to hear it, but it's completely different when it's coming from the source, which is yourself. Like from your voice box, and then suddenly your heart recognizes it because your mind's able to create that connection. And you're like, I am valuable, I am worthy, and I am beautiful, and any kind of affirmation.
Affirmations are a good place to start with this work.
Amazing. Well, this was such a wonderful conversation, Michelle. I truly, truly appreciate you sharing your story and continuing the work and your vulnerability to say that this is not it's not a one-stop thing, and personally, like again, you could be in the healthiest part of your life where it feels like the healthiest part, but there is still work to be done, and there is still those, bits from the past that we have to, you know, in a way unlearn through those resources that you spoke of. And so again, thank you so much for your expertise and you're very sweet and And if you had any last remarks for everybody to chip into, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say that like if you're curious about what we're talking about or like ready to take the next steps, whatever that looks like for you, to reach out, whether that's to me or to another professional, but don't hesitate. Like you are worth doing this work for, right? We are worth doing the deep work it takes to really live to our full potential. And so start it, like whatever that looks like for you, just start, take that baby step, take that first action and move towards the life you were created for.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of Love and Lattes. And we will see you in the next episode.